Military leader Ibrahim Traoré is reportedly facing a mutiny, which is linked to the June 11 attack by Al-Qaeda-affiliated insurgents that left over 100 Burkina Faso soldiers
missing Ibrahim Traoré by mere inches. In an instant, the world explodes into chaos. But his bodyguards, they don't flinch. They move like ghosts, swift, silent, and surgical. Within seconds, the scene is under control. The assassin is down, the president unharmed. What just happened wasn't luck. It was a masterclass in presidential protection. What secret tactics do Traoré's elite guards train for in the shadows? And how did a mercenary get close enough to pull the trigger on one of Africa's youngest and most controversial presidents?
Ibrahim Traoré is the new self-declared leader of Burkina Faso. He overthrew the president Paul-Henri Damiba alongside a group of soldiers. Traoré has gone from being a career soldier.
Stick around, because today we're diving into the insane, covert, and downright cinematic strategies Traoré's guards used to save his life, and how one missed bullet changed everything. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré first appeared in the public eye, he wasn't draped in presidential robes or speaking behind a podium. He was in camouflage, standing tall among a group of fatigued soldiers, defiant in posture, but calculated in his words. Just 34 years old, Traoré didn't inherit power. He seized it. In October 2022, amid growing unrest and public frustration over escalating jihadist violence, the young officer led a coup that ousted Burkina Faso's interim leader. In doing so, he became the world's youngest sitting president, and instantly one of its most endangered. But to understand why Traoré became a target, we have to go deeper. Burkina Faso is a country under siege, not by one enemy, but by a tangled web of threats. Islamist militant groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS have turned parts of the country into conflict zones, forcing millions to flee their homes. Rural towns are overrun. Roads once bustling with commerce now hide IEDs beneath the sand. In the north, in the Sahel region, entire villages are controlled not by the state, but by armed insurgents. And then there's the political chessboard, littered with fractured alliances, foreign agendas, and the scars of colonialism. France, Russia, the United States, and even private military actors like the Wagner Group have all had their hands in Burkina Faso's affairs, each for their own interests. Amid this swirl of influence and violence, Ibrahim Traoré didn't just challenge the status quo, he detonated it. Unlike his predecessors, Traoré openly rejected the country's reliance on Western military aid. He pushed French troops out of the country. He spoke of sovereignty, of Burkinabe solutions for Burkinabe problems. In doing so, he not only made enemies of foreign powers and their corporate interests, but also became the focal point of resentment from internal factions, displaced elites, rival officers, and warlords, stripped of their access to state power. To some, Traoré became a symbol of youthful hope and military discipline. To others, he was a ticking time bomb, destabilizing an already fragile region. It was only a matter of time before someone tried to silence him. The day of the assassination attempt started like any other. A warm, dry afternoon in Ouagadougou, the capital. The sun bore down relentlessly on the city, baking the pavement and casting long, sharp shadows across the presidential compound. Traoré was scheduled to make a brief appearance at a closed-door meeting with security advisors, a routine engagement. But routine doesn't exist in a country gripped by instability, especially not for a man who sleeps with his boots on. Inside the compound, his bodyguards were already on edge. In the days leading up to the meeting, chatter on encrypted channels hinted at an imminent disruption. A vague warning, nothing more. But vague warnings are what these men are trained to live by. The compound was on partial lockdown. Plainclothes guards blended into the background, while snipers scanned from distant rooftops. Surveillance drones floated high above like metal birds. Inside the courtyard, Traoré arrived in his standard armored SUV, black, reinforced, anonymous. His face remained calm, unreadable, but his security team was tense, eyes darting, hands twitching near their sidearms. No one expected what came next. As Traoré exited the vehicle, stepping toward the shaded corridor that led to the inner chamber, a muffled crack split the air. It wasn't fireworks, it wasn't a tire burst, it was a bullet, high caliber, fired from distance. aimed with precision, and it missed him by inches. In the span of half a second, his team exploded into action. Their movements were mechanical, pre-rehearsed, and terrifying in their efficiency. Traoré was dragged behind cover. The man beside him, an elite bodyguard known only as Cal, took the lead. Cal didn't blink. He moved faster than most could process, his sidearm already drawn before the bullet had finished echoing. But what stunned even seasoned intelligence analysts later wasn't just that Traoré survived. It was how, because that single shot triggered a response that looked more like a military ambush than a close protection maneuver. In the moments that followed, the entire presidential security team revealed tactics no one outside their circle had seen before. Some borrowed from Russian counterinsurgency doctrine, others resembling Mossad-style deception. These weren't mere bodyguards, they were ghost operatives. And the attacker, not a lone wolf, not some disgruntled citizen. Intelligence would later confirm the presence of a well-equipped mercenary unit operating within city limits that week. Their target, Traoré. Their mission, eliminate and vanish. But thanks to a web of counter-surveillance, last-minute contingency drills, and the kind of close-quarter defense tactics few presidential teams can execute without loss of life, that mission failed, spectacularly. But it left behind one critical message. The bullet may have missed, but the war for Traoré's life had officially begun. It happened in a blink. A single, thunderous crack shattered the air, the kind of sound that makes crowds freeze and birds vanish from the sky. The camera pans in on Ibrahim Traoré's face as the bullet cuts through the space beside him. Close enough to disturb the air, close enough to kill. But it missed, just barely. Before the echo even faded, his security detail was already in motion. It wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Every step, every movement had been drilled into muscle memory. Traoré was gone from public view in less than 2 seconds. But how? How does a president in an open-air corridor survive a sniper-grade assassination attempt without a scratch? The answer lies in a secretive force that operates far beyond the job description of bodyguards. Traoré's inner security circle is composed of operatives trained not only in urban warfare, but also in asymmetric threat environments, much like elite Russian FSO agents or the US Secret Service CAT, counter-assault team. But there's a twist. Traoré's team is trained for the specific chaos of West African insurgencies, where the enemy might be a soldier, a civilian, or a politician in disguise. So, who pulled the trigger? Initial intel pointed to a foreign mercenary, possibly Eastern European. Recovered shell casings suggested a sniper using an imported suppressed bolt-action rifle. The profile was unmistakable. High caliber, high skill, high pay. Not a local thug, not a message. This was an execution attempt. Rumors swirled about coordination with local assets. Someone on the inside might have fed timing or location info. It was surgical, calculated, and it nearly worked. But here's where the story flips. The shield wall protocol, the tactic that saved Traoré's life. Moments after the shot, 3 guards converged in a triangle around the president, forming a live barrier with armored torsos, Kevlar-coated umbrellas, and curved ballistic shields that unfolded from concealed satchels. These aren't props. They're purpose-built tools, lightweight, flexible, capable of deflecting incoming fire while moving at sprint speed. Behind the triangle came a 4th, the anchor. His role, shield the rear and radio in the escape code. The moment Traoré disappeared behind the column wall, the protocol shifted into phase 2. Instant threat triangulation, a method borrowed from counter-sniper doctrine. Hidden spotters in adjacent rooftops had already marked 5 potential shooter nests before the event began. Once the first shot rang out, their optics locked in. Within 15 seconds, they had identified the origin of the muzzle flash and the direction of travel. But what if it wasn't just bullets? That's where mobile jamming units come into play. 2 guards stationed in plainclothes at the perimeter activated high-frequency scramblers designed to disrupt remote signal detonators. These EMP-style briefcase units don't just jam, they fry. Any remote trigger system within a 100-meter radius would either misfire or shut down entirely. It wasn't just about surviving a gunman. It was about preparing for the second wave. A car bomb, a drone strike, or a coordinated push from ground actors posing as journalists, aides, or vendors. So they activated their most covert maneuver. As Traoré's body double, a fellow soldier with similar build and dress, was rushed toward the visible armored vehicle, the real president was taken underground, literally. Through a utility access point built into the compound floor plan for emergency egress. Flanked by 2 guards and a medic, he moved through a narrow corridor beneath the complex that led out to a concealed safe house 3 blocks away. Above ground, chaos raged. Civilians ducked, staff scattered, gunshots returned fire toward the suspected sniper nest. But Traoré was already gone, a ghost slipping through concrete veins. To understand the level of training here, consider this. When Vladimir Putin travels, his elite FSO team uses a 4-layered circle of protection, each ring responsible for a specific threat range. When US presidents move, decoy convoys and tactical backdoors are standard protocol. But Traoré's team is playing a hybrid game, combining guerrilla agility with elite discipline. Their methods are raw, but ruthlessly effective. And here's what's wild. They don't have the same billion-dollar budget. They train with necessity. They improvise. And that improvisation might be what saved their president's life. Bodyguard testimony, dramatized quote. "The plan isn't to stop the bullet," one guard later admitted under anonymity. "It's to not be there when it lands." Another guard described the scene like this. "Everything we rehearsed, it happened in less time than a breath. We didn't panic, we deployed. That's the difference between a funeral and an escape." But just as the team reached Phase 3, evacuation protocol, the second shot rang out. This one came from the east. It struck the vehicle meant to carry the decoy, and that's when the mobile ballistic shield was deployed. A full-body barrier rolled out from a modified SUV trunk, capable of stopping armor-piercing rounds. The decoy vehicle burned, screams filled the air, but Traoré, already blocks away, was untouched. Within 30 seconds of the second shot, a perimeter team breached the suspected shooter nest. Inside, 1 rifle, spent casings, and a rooftop rigged for fast descent. But the attacker? Gone, or so they thought. A block away, a second unit picked up a lone figure trying to blend into a delivery crew. His gear, non-standard issue. His ID, fake. His story, full of holes. He didn't make it out. Pretty intense, right? If you're blown away by this level of protection, just wait till you see what they did next. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you love behind-the-scenes stories like this, because what happens after the dust settles is even more insane. The gunfire faded, the smoke cleared, the sniper's nest was breached, but there was no assassin in sight. Only a shell casing still warm to the touch, and the faint scent of engine oil from a repelling rig, suggesting the attacker had vanished into the chaos mere seconds before security forces arrived. To this day, the official story remains a blur of contradictions. Some whispered that the assassin was killed on sight and his identity scrubbed before the public ever knew his name. Others say he escaped, fled the country through a black market extraction pipeline run by mercenary networks. One unverified leak from a high-ranking intelligence officer hinted that the man wasn't alone. The 2 other contractors, possibly South African or Eastern European, had been embedded in the city days before the hit. But none of that made the headlines. What did? President Ibrahim Traoré appearing on national television just 4 hours after the attempt on his life. He was calm, collected, not a scratch on him. Dressed in military fatigues, flanked by 2 of his security chiefs, his message was chillingly simple. He didn't mention the attempt directly. He didn't have to. The message was clear. He was still standing. And whoever had tried to remove him had failed. The government followed with silence. No official statement, no investigation updates. Just a subtle tightening of the presidential security perimeter, a flurry of internal reshuffling, and a quiet but immediate blackout on the event across state-run media. But while the government stayed silent, the entire region was watching. Within days, other West African leaders ramped up their own security details. Suddenly, presidential motorcades grew longer. Airport arrivals included extra tactical units, and private chatter among foreign diplomats revealed what many feared but rarely said aloud. A new era of warfare had arrived, not at the borders, but at the doorsteps of Africa's rising leaders. For decades, presidential protection in many African countries followed a simple formula: military convoy in front, armed escort in the rear. It was about visibility, power through presence. But what happened to Traoré revealed a fatal flaw in that thinking. Visibility can be a liability. Traoré's guards weren't just soldiers. They were trained for urban warfare, high-level subterfuge, and crowd dispersal mechanics. And they weren't trained locally. In fact, many of his closest security personnel are believed to have undergone tactical instruction overseas, in Russian Spetsnaz academies, Israeli counterterrorism schools, and Chinese intelligence campuses. The goal wasn't just protection, it was anticipation, interdiction, extraction, and Traoré is far from alone in this approach. Paul Kagame, president of Rwanda, maintains one of the most advanced presidential protection units on the continent. Steeped in Israeli defense strategy and designed for both urban defense and bush warfare. His personal safety unit is known to rotate between 5 different shift teams trained in psychological profiling, surveillance disruption, and electronic warfare. Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, a veteran of power and paranoia alike, commands a full-blown Special Forces Command SFC unit, trained abroad and armed with military-grade tech, including drone swarms, anti-aircraft capabilities, and a human intel division embedded within civilian infrastructure. And if you want to go back further, Muammar Gaddafi turned personal protection into legend with his all-female bodyguard brigade known as the Amazonian Guard. But beneath the theatrics was a core truth. Gaddafi didn't trust his army. He trusted loyalty first, capability second. That same philosophy now drives Traoré. His inner circle is not just trained, they're handpicked for ideological alignment. These aren't mercenaries, they're loyalists. Men and women who believe in the vision of a sovereign Burkina Faso. For them, protecting Traoré isn't a job, it's a mission. Sources suggest these elite units train far from the public eye, deep in the countryside of Burkina Faso, where abandoned military bases have reportedly been converted into modern training compounds. Satellite imagery has picked up vehicle activity in what were once dormant zones. Locals speak of nighttime helicopter runs and drills that shake the earth beneath their villages. But not all eyes watching Traoré are friendly. There's growing speculation that Western intelligence agencies, alarmed by his rejection of French influence, are quietly monitoring his inner circle. Some believe that Wagner-style private military companies, still active in neighboring regions, might have interest in either protecting or neutralizing the young president, depending on who writes the checks. The lines between ally and enemy have blurred. In today's Africa, mercenaries and state operatives often walk the same streets. And for a revolutionary president who took power in his 30s, Traoré now lives each day with a target on his back and a weapon by his side. A close aide once described him like this: "He doesn't flinch, but he never relaxes. He lives like a man who knows every speech could be his last." And maybe that's the price of power, especially for those who seize it instead of inherit it. For every bold decision Traoré makes, there are whispers in the shadows, rifles on rooftops, and motorbikes in the distance that never quite seem to turn the corner. Because it only takes one mistake, one gap in formation, one moment of misdirection, and the bullet that missed could find its mark. So the question is, how many more bullets are coming? Let us know what you think in the comments. Was this an isolated event, or just the beginning? And if you want more deep dives into the real, raw world of power and survival in modern Africa, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell so you don't miss part 2, where we reveal the man who took the bullet meant for Traoré, and why that 1 second changed everything.